Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham. I am the president and founder of Accepted. I'm also the host of the Admission Straight Talk podcast. I've been advising successful medical school applicants since the mid 1990s. I want to thank you very much for coming to today's webinar, and I'm looking forward to sharing my 25 years of admissions experience with you. Now, before we begin, I want to point out a few items that will help you maximize your time here, and one that will help us improve these webinars. First, I'm going to be asking several questions during the presentation, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand to some of them. So in order to raise your hand, you can do so not by waving it in front of the monitor, but by clicking on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. That's number one. Number two, I mentioned I'm going to ask questions. Some of them will be open-ended kinds of questions, and I would like you to respond to those in the question window. So whether you're asking a question, which we also encourage, or answering one of mine, please use the question window. If a question comes to you during the course of the webinar, I've allowed time for questions. Please just post it and we'll get to it later on. If you've not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so. You can find it in the handout section of your control panel. Actually, I'm not sure you can find it in the handout section of your control panel. I don't see it there right now, but hopefully you got it via email. So I don't know, Rachel, can you upload it, or hopefully again they got it earlier. When you leave, you're going to get a brief survey. Please fill it out. And then this is the last of the announcements. It's probably the best, or at least the most favorite of attendees. This is the bonus offer for webinar attendees, $50 off our rejection review if purchased by March 20th. That's tomorrow. So you know you've been rejected. You should want feedback on your application so that you can determine what went wrong and how to fix it for going forward. Again, coupon code, well, not again, it's $50 off rejection review, purchase today or tomorrow. Coupon code MEDRR, save 50. That's MEDRR as in rejection review. And the URL is also on the screen, accepted.com/change-med-reject. Okay, so I'd like to learn a little bit about you, as I usually do at the beginning of a webinar. So the first thing I'd like to know is how many times have you applied to medical school? Please click on the appropriate number. The options are 1, 2, 3, or more. Again, how many times have you applied to medical school? 1, 2, 3, or more. With 69% having voted, can we get somebody else to vote? I assume that everybody here has applied to medical school before. But all right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. 83% of you have applied once, 17% of you have applied twice, and nobody has applied 3 or more times. Okay, I thought I would get a couple with a 3, but all right, and I assume that most would be here having applied once before. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'd also like to test your hand-raising skill for a moment. Please raise your hand if you want to go to medical school to pursue your dream career, becoming a physician. And again, that means clicking on that hand icon. Okay, oh, good. Most of you are here for the right reason. Yes, definitely, and you also know how to raise your hands. Good, that's great. And then the last question I have for you is, let's hide the poll. And why do you think you were rejected? And you can choose more than one option. The options are low stats, lack of clinical and/or research experience, poor essays, bombed your interviews, or other. And again, you can choose more than one option. Choose all that you feel apply to you. The options are low stats, lack of clinical and/or research experience, poor essays, bombed your interview, or other. All right, with 75% having voted, can we get it up to 80? Great. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We were at 80 a minute ago. All right, let's go on. I'm going to share the results. 69%, with 76% having voted, 69% say low stats, 23% said lack of clinical and/or research experience, 46% said poor essays. Nobody feels that their interviews played a role, and 50% said other. And obviously this is way more than 100%, so most of you feel that more than one factor played a role, and that's also probably correct. So, all right, so again, 69, low stats was the winner, and then 46% said poor essays. I should tell you that we'll be having a webinar in May specifically on the writing associated with the MCAS application, but that's a story for another day. And unless you unsubscribe from our email list, you'll be notified about that. There also is a low stats webinar coming up in June. So we are, I guess, anticipating some of your concerns here. All right, thanks, Rachel, for that reminder. Let's dive into the content now. The first thing I think you have to do when deciding whether to reapply or not is think about, do you still want to be a physician? Let me make sure that you're seeing the slides. Yes. If you don't want to be a physician, or you're not sure that, that is not driving you at this point, then you really don't need to sit in for the rest of the webinar. You can go do something else, go have dinner or whatever. If you do want to still be a physician, then by all means, pull up a chair, hold onto your hat. There's a lot of material to cover. There are 4 basic reasons for rejection. You weren't competitive at the schools you applied to. That relates to those low stats we were talking about a minute ago. You didn't present your qualifications effectively. That probably has to do more with the poor essays and the bombed your interview stuff, but nobody bombed their interview here. And you were a victim of the numbers. In other words, you were competitive, you presented yourself well, but competition just did you in. And that could be the other portion of that, at least part of it, in that poll I just did, and then a combination of factors 1 through 3. And there are pretty much 4 ways to respond to these elements. First is change your target programs to those where you will be competitive. If you applied all MD, consider DO. If you applied DO, well, you might want to consider PA, or you might want to consider international medical schools. Another option is to improve your qualifications, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, so that you become competitive at the schools that previously rejected you. 3 is improve the presentation of your qualifications. And for those of you who felt that your essays played a significant role, and it was almost half of you, that, again, you're going to simply have to do that. And then a combination of the above, which is probably what most of you are going to need. Now, let's look into this a little bit more. What do I mean when I say you weren't competitive at the schools you applied to? Well, academics are usually the first place to look, and I'm pretty sure that's what you were referring to when you said low stats, right? If you have a GPA that's low, an MCAT that's low for the schools that you are applying to, you have a problem. Now, what does low mean? I'm going to give you some rules of thumb. These are not cast in concrete, okay? So don't have a flip attack if you say, well, my friend got in and, or I don't think that's right. Again, these are just guidelines, not hard and fast rules. If you are applying to a school and your GPA is 0.2 or more on the US 4.0 scale, below that of the school, you might be considered to have a low GPA. If your MCAT is more than 3 points below the school's average, that might be an issue. However, what I would really suggest you do is look at MSAR's 25th to 75th percentile for admitted students. I think that that's a better indication of where low is. If you're outside that range, especially if both the MCAT and the GPA are either at the lower end of that 25th to 75th percentile range or outside of it and on the wrong side, then I think you have a problem. And you probably were or should have been in those people who said low stats were a problem when you applied. You probably will want at least one of those numbers at or above average unless you're from a group that's underrepresented in medicine. And regardless of your group, you need to provide the evidence that you can do the work required in medical school. They don't want to flunk people out. So that's, what can you do if you determine that that was a factor? Well, you can apply to programs where you are competitive based on your current stats. Or that could be, again, as I mentioned, either less competitive MD programs or DO programs or perhaps programs outside the United States, though I have concerns about those programs. Or you can improve your qualifications so that you will be competitive at the programs you want to go to. Now, how do you improve those qualifications, those stats in particular? Well, one way is you do a post-bac program, either a formal one or an informal one. And if you do well, especially in the formal ones, you are showing that you can handle the work. Many of the formal post-bac programs also provide MCAT support. They provide study skill support so that you can improve your study skills. And some of them have linkages to different medical schools. I'm really not advocating formal or informal. It's really an individual decision. But certainly those kinds of factors, do they provide MCAT support? Do they provide study skills courses? Do they have linkages to certain medical schools? Should be factors in your decision as to where to apply. And then, of course, there's preparing for and retaking the MCAT. Now, I suggest that just as you would be, that you up the ante in terms of preparation. If you did self-study before and you can afford to take a course, at least an online course, do so. If you took a course before, maybe it wasn't online, go for a traditional if you think that's more effective, or go for a tutor. But if what you did, you really, really applied yourself to and it didn't work, then you need to change something. Okay? The MCAT is important and it's hard. It's a really, really hard exam. So you want to allow time for it, and again, devote significant resources to it. View it as a class or a job. It's not something that you kind of do when you can fit it into your schedule. It has to be a significant part of your schedule while you're preparing for it. And the other part, and I know this is hard, it's much more fun to practice what's easy, what comes naturally. But when you're doing it, focus on what you found difficult, because that's the part that really needs to be improved. And I know, it's not so much fun, but that's the reality of it. Now, what about other elements that medical schools look for? I mentioned in that poll that I did, clinical exposure. Well, that is really, really important. It's really mandatory. Medical schools want to know that you know what you're getting yourself into So if you don't have it, get it. If you only have shadowing, then seek a role where you are active, where you have some responsibility and are interacting with sick people and their families, or at least with other clinicians. Because again, shadowing, it's good. It's a good start. It's a way to kind of dip your toes in the water. But when you shadow somebody, you're not really interacting with patients or their families or their clinicians other than the one doctor. You're observing, you're passive, and you're the only one benefiting from the experience. So try to seek out roles where you can be a little bit more active. You could be an EMT, you can be a scribe, you can be an ER volunteer, a clinic volunteer, a hospice volunteer. Any of those roles will put you in a position where you are, again, interacting with and really experiencing what being a clinician is like. Now, research. It is not required by many medical schools, especially primary care oriented or clinically oriented medical schools, but research oriented programs will want to see it, and even the less research oriented programs will value it if you have it. So again, know yourself. Presumably, if you're interested in research and a research oriented program, you will have done research. I wouldn't slave away at a lab if you really hate it. I'd go much more for the clinical exposure. Community service is also something that medical schools value, and it has multiple benefits to you as an applicant. Realize that medicine is about service, and caring. And getting involved in a community service activity shows that you care. It also enables you to reveal the leadership and teamwork skills that are vital in medicine. So if you don't have any, again, I would start doing it or getting it. All right, so those are kinds of the ways that you maybe weren't as competitive as you wanted to be. What about poor presentation? That was another element I said, or the second element I said what could really play a role in a rejection. Okay, so for the primary application, that it's really about fitness for a career as a physician. Yes, there's an academic element to that, and we just discussed it. Can you do the work, right? Do you have the intellect to keep learning, as physicians must do, and handle a very demanding scientific curriculum? But medical schools also want multidimensional human beings committed, as I said before, to service and caring for others. So do your personal statements and most meaningful experience essays both show your motivation for medicine and provide insight to you as a caring, compassionate human being? Do the essays and activity descriptions complement each other and the rest of the primary application and show you as that multidimensional human being who will make a great physician? If you answered no to any of the questions I just asked, you have work to do, and presentation probably played a role in your rejection. Now, again, it's not just if you have that feeling, but did your essays portray that? Those, not just feeling, those qualities. The secondary applications, and it's not that they ignore their fitness for a physician, but they're much more about your showing fit with a specific school. Were your secondary essays generic and not specific to the given school? Did they duplicate the primary application if there were essays asked? Were they rushed and sloppy? Yes to any of the above, and you need to change that next time around. Does your and finally, does your writing throughout your primary and secondary applications show that you can communicate? Communications is critical in medicine, both listening and conveying clear thoughts and information. Your essays represent your communication skills. Now realize it's very hard to be objective about your own writing, and writing requires rewriting. So you have to reveal the attention to detail and thoroughness that medical schools are looking for. Now, I recently, not so recently, actually, it was a couple of years ago, I interviewed Jennifer Welch, Associate Dean of Admissions at SUNY Upstate. And she said, you know, the sloppiness in their secondary, which apparently is just a simple form, drives them up the wall and can lead to rejections. In her words, the secondary gives us information about applicants and also info about how they do things, professionalism, attention to detail. If you make careless mistakes, such as errors in capitalization, etc., it's a red flag. Do you really want to get rejected from medical school because you didn't capitalize? You treated it as a tweet or as a text message? Folks, this is professional school. Treat it as such. Now, for the writing portions of the primary application, keep in mind this goal: portraying yourself as a multidimensional human being committed to service and caring for others. And each element should in the application should contribute to that portrait. Now, I have an acronym, PAD, and you should keep it in mind for your personal statement, for your most meaningful experiences, and also for the longer secondary essays. PAD stands for P, provide a window into the real you. Who are you beyond the transcript and the MCAT score? A, add value to the rest of the application, which kind of goes into, you know, talk about different experiences. Okay, don't just be a one-trick pony. We had a client a couple of years ago who unfortunately had to deal with a serious health problem that really changed the trajectory of his life. And he kept talking about his experience as a patient. And I was reviewing one of his essays at one point, and I said to the consultant, doesn't he have something else that he can write about? Some other things he's in? So she said, oh yeah, he can write about this, he can write about that. And I said, well, I think he should, because he's really coming across as one-dimensional. So so again, and in terms of adding value, don't keep writing about the same thing or talking about an interview. And then D, demonstrate writing and communication skills. So again, P, provide a window into the real you. A, add value to the rest of the application. And D, demonstrate writing and communications ability. Now, we constantly encourage our applicants to use specifics and anecdotes to prove the claims you make, add interest to your essay, and to differentiate you from your competition. I'd like to, at this point, just do a quick hand raising with you folks for just a second, okay? How many of you have done, raise your hand if you've done some form of community service. Raise your hand if you've done some form of community service. Okay. All right, most of you have. How many of you have volunteered, have served as a counselor at a camp for kids with special needs where you were responsible for a ventilator-dependent teen? Let me put down all your hands. Good. How many of you, okay. How many of you have served as a counselor for a ventilator-dependent teen? Okay, okay. All right, so the first answer was 58% of you was community service, and the second one was 4%. All right, next question. How many of you, let's see, let me think of a good one here. Let me think of a good one. How many of you have volunteered in a clinical setting? Please raise your hand. Okay, and that is 54%. And how many of you have volunteered in an AIDS hospice? Again, AIDS hospice. Okay. All right. Okay, that's 8%. Now let me ask you, what's in the question window, please? What's the difference between the first and third question versus the second and fourth question that I asked? In the question window, please. Okay, you're getting it. The specific setting, right? Differentiating, standing up for the competition, more unique and direct patient contact, right? The main point, anybody else? What happens when I ask this very specific question? Let me go back. What happened when I asked a very general question? In the question window, please. Wider audience, okay. What else happens? Most people experienced it, that's right. It failed to distinguish you, is what I'm looking for, okay? But when I ask a specific question, it's not as unique, exactly. But when I asked a specific question, there were fewer people who could answer it affirmatively. There were a few people who had had that experience. And basically, it was distinguishing. It was distinctive and distinguishing, and perhaps a little bit more memorable, right? Volunteering is common. Even volunteering in a clinical setting is common. But doing the specific activities that I was asking about, that's much less common. And that is distinctive and distinguishing. Now, we constantly encourage our clients to use specifics and anecdotes to prove the claims that they make, add interest to their essays, and differentiate themselves from the competitions. And that's exactly what I'm suggesting to you and trying to illustrate with this little experiment that I did. Now, you need to balance those stories and anecdotes out with analysis that relates why the incident is important and revealing. For the primary, it's why do you want to be a physician, and what is your fitness as a physician? That's really what it's all about. What qualities will make you a wonderful physician? For the secondaries, it's more about how do the examples you provide answer the question posed and show fit with a particular program's strengths and mission and opportunities. Just as I advise you to do to up your game with MCAT prep, to raise your score, consider upping your game by working with an accepted consultant who can provide the expertise, experience, and objectivity that you lack and can certainly benefit from when it comes to your essays if you feel that presentation played a role or poor presentation played a role in your rejection. Now, none of you felt that you bombed your interview, so I'm not going to belabor this point, but I do want to to just touch on it. If you receive 3 or more interview invitations and still didn't get an acceptance anywhere, I wonder about your interview skills. Again, much like with the secondary, the focus in the interview is on fit with the program. Yes, the interviewers want to see you as a member of their community and someone whom they would like to have as a colleague. If you didn't show fit by being able to express why you want to attend that school, you could have blown your interview. Or none of you felt that way, so let me just put it in the future. If you get rattled and show your nerves when invited to interview, you could be blowing your interview. If you come across as cocky or arrogant, you will blow your interview. And if they don't see you as someone they would want to have treating their family member, well, you could be blowing your interview. So you want to have a credible, coherent reason why any interviewing school is the right one for you. That you should walk into the interview being able to say why you'd love to go to that school. And the other thing you should do, since most people are nervous when they're interviewing, is practice interviewing to calm your nerves and ace your interviews. And yes, we do offer mock interviews. Now, what if you feel that you were competitive and you did a great job presenting yourself and that you really were just a victim of the numbers and the intense competition that is a reality when you apply to medical school? It is possible to be qualified and to present yourself well and still get rejected because competition is extraordinarily intense at medical school. Now, if you honestly believe you were competitive at last year's schools or the previous time that you applied and also presented your qualifications well, I still have a couple of suggestions for you. The first one, which I know is going to be tough to swallow, is don't do exactly what you did last time you applied. A, it didn't work. And B, which is probably more important, is you will fail to show growth and maturation. Schools will be impressed negatively by the lack of effort you are investing this time around. You want to show the growth and improvement and the new experiences and, again, the maturation that has to be taking place at this time in your life. Do apply to more schools this time around, unless you applied to an enormous number last time. You should really apply to all in-state programs that you would consider attending, and then again, look out of state. But look primarily at those programs out of state that are open to out-of-state applicants. I would also suggest, unless you applied in June, that you apply earlier in the cycle. And yes, I know it's very hard to be objective about something you've poured your heart and soul into, like your medical school application. And that's why I recommend the rejection review that I started the webinar with and that we'll get back to in a few minutes. But avoid the conclusion that you did everything right and that competition, a reality you have no control over, was the sole cause of your rejection. For most of our clients, we find that when we do the rejection review, we find that a combination of 1 and 2, your competitiveness at specific schools and flawed presentation of those qualifications contributed at least somewhat, if not significantly, to rejection. The good news is that in terms of your qualifications and presentation, you really can influence and not control those elements. The good news is that you can change them. It takes time and effort, and I know it's not easy, but it is possible, and you can't do anything about the competition. Now, we'd like to help you analyze what went wrong and apply effectively. But let's first focus on helping you figure out what went wrong and then give you some suggestions on how to move forward. I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, of med school applicants over the years. Like you, striving to get into medical school and overwhelmed by the work involved and perhaps rejected the first, second, or yes, even third time around before they came to Accepted. We here at Accepted know how difficult and stressful this process can be, and we're here to help you. Your goal, apply confidently and successfully to the best program for you. To do so, you need the know-how supplied by experts, applying their expertise and experience to your situation, your individual situation, and that implies consulting. Given the complexity of the application process and the stakes, and the fact that you really want this to be your last time applying to medical school, you need a guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. With Accepted, you can access professional expert advice, experience, objectivity. You can save time, apply with confidence, and this time around, hopefully apply successfully. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. Former admissions directors, staff members, post-bac program directors, and pre-health advising professionals who have been on the other side evaluating applications, and uh, and they can also now be your guide through the application process. Here's what you should do. Visit accepted.com/change-med-reject. Choose the service that's right for you. Get the guidance you need to apply the high-level advice I've given here to your specific situation, and then go from confusion to clarity, from doubts to confidence. Now, some of you may say, isn't accepted expensive? Well, frankly, rejection is more expensive. Our fees are clear, but the cost of rejection is not quite as obvious, though some of you have experienced it, so you might actually know, even though it can be significantly higher. So let's take a look at the risks of not applying with accepted. The cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s, especially if you count just in application fees. If you apply to 20 schools, there's the MCAS fee, secondary fees. You're looking probably between $2,000 and $3,000 right there. And then there could be the possibility that you need to retake the MCAT, prep for it, and retake it. There could be travel expenses associated with reapplication. And the biggest expense, however, is that you have a year of earnings at a much lower level than you'll have after you earn your MD or DO degree. And then the third element is that there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program, perhaps with greater lifetime opportunities and even earnings. Now, you're at a crossroads now. You took the do-it-yourself approach last time around, and let's face it, it didn't work. Take a different route this time, a professional option for your professional future, your dream career. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, to work with us the second or third time around. They would have been better off working with us when they first got in touch with us, and so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted's clients say? Here's a sample of feedback that we received from clients who were accepted by December in their application cycle. I just found out I was accepted into the University of Kentucky's medical school program. They said my interview really impressed them. Thank you so much for all your help, advice, and preparation, because without you, I wouldn't have been able to be where I am today. Or the second one, I got into UVM this morning, so thrilled about the news. Thank you so much for your support throughout the process. I'm still waiting to hear back from other schools, but this is such a relief. And this is from a reapplicant who was later accepted also to Tulane and LSU. And the third one, working with Alicia has been an indescribably wonderful experience and one of the best investments in my life. Thank you so much for making this possible through Accepted. Now, Joe, the author of this last testimonial, was accepted in late December as a reapplicant. He followed Alicia's advice to both beef up his qualification and improve his presentation. He worked hard, but he knew before New Year's that he was going to medical school, and he was simply thrilled. Now, we'd love to help you as we help these clients, the ones who wrote the comments you just saw, and thousands of other clients over the last 20 years. So once again, this is what I recommend you do as a follow-up to today's webinar. Visit accepted.com/change-med-reject. Choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and apply confidently and successfully. And I mentioned earlier a bonus. I'm going to repeat it here. $50 off rejection review, purchased today or tomorrow. That's March, today the 19th, tomorrow the 20th. Coupon code MEDRR-SAVE50. That's MED rejection review, save 50. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. Please post your questions in the question window. Okay, Nicholas asks, can you request a specific advisor? Yes, you can, and I believe at this point all are available. They will start to book up though, so then, obviously if you can request a specific advisor, and as long as that advisor is available, you can work with that person. Thanks for the question. Okay, let's see. All right, so Cassandra asks, thank you for this webinar. It was very informative. I applied to 20 schools, 16 DO schools, and 2 ND schools. ND, I assume is that naturopathic doctors? And 2 PhD programs. Can you speak about the professional stigma surrounding ND programs? I have 4 applications for DO schools still out, but was accepted to the 2 ND schools as well as 2 PhD psychology programs. I don't know what to do and what to accept. Well, I'm not that familiar with the ND program, so I'm not sure I can really address that. I think it probably is very much a licensing issue, or is ND nurse a doctor of nursing, or is it a naturopathic doctor? Naturopathic, that's what I thought. All right. I think you really have to think about your goals and what you want to do. My husband, for one particular issue that he was having, went to an ND and was actually very happy with the experience, but normally we both go to MDs. There are limits on, kind of legal limits to what NDs can do and what they can prescribe. If you are happy to live within those limits, then the ND program, and you also ascribe to that particular approach, that philosophy, then it might be a great option for you. If you want to not have to deal with those limits, then you probably want to, if you're not accepted to DO schools that you haven't heard from, then you probably want to reapply. It doesn't make any sense to pursue the ND degree if you're not going to want to be the naturopathic doctor. I think that's what I'm trying to get across. In terms of the PhD in psychology programs, again, I think you really have to think about what you want to do. And that's not something that I can really address here. But I hope I helped a little bit. Okay. Okay, let's see what else we have. Okay. How do you help with school selection? Do I talk with the advisor on phone or via email? In terms of school selection, we talk with the applicant and we'll review their qualifications. We'll also ask them about things like, do they think they want to go into primary care? Are they more interested in specialties? Do they have personal preferences in terms of, weather and location? Do they have educational preferences in terms of approach to medical education? Do they want a systems approach, problem-based learning, these kinds of things? And based on what they say, as well as their qualifications, we'll advise them on school choice. Okay, thank you for that one. And you would, for the school choice conversation, you ask if it would be done via phone or email. Probably via phone. Some clients prefer email, and so that would be we would do that. Okay, let's see what else I have here. Janice asked, can you give us some more examples of the things you go over with more specific with the person? You mean if we work with you, it's all one-on-one. I mean, it would be definitely specific to you. So we would, depending upon the service you purchase, if you purchase one of our primary packages, then we would go over we'd want to see your transcript. We would obviously be advising you both on we'd want to see your activity history or resume. We'd be advising you on what to include in the personal statement as opposed to the most meaningful experience essays. We want to make sure that they complement each other, what should go in the activity descriptions. This would be all something that we would discuss together with the individual client. And you would then write your essays and your most meaningful experience pieces, and we would critique them and edit them for you. If we work with you on secondaries, it would be a similar process of discussing what experiences best complement the primary, answer the secondary questions, and will show fit with the individual programs you're applying to. And then again, you'll write the essays and we'll critique them and edit them. So did I answer your question, Janice? But thank you for the question. Good. Kathy asked, how do you do the rejection review? Do you look at the prior application essays? That's exactly what we do. We look at one primary application, it can be MCAS or COMAS, and then we'll look at two secondary applications, up to two secondary applications, that are associated with that primary, and we'll provide feedback and suggestions for improvement, or TMDSAS. We also do TMDSAS. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Is everything done through email and phone? Almost all the time it's email and phone. Occasionally your consultant is located in the same city that you are, and then in person is an option. Also, web conferencing is an option, but most of it is through email and phone. And obviously exchanging essays is, email. Let's see what else we have here. What are your thoughts on doing post-bac versus special master's programs? The post-bac programs, I don't quite understand why this is. The post-bac programs seem to have a greater impact in play a bigger role in medical school admissions. They somehow have greater credibility. That's my impression. Special master's programs have the advantage of you getting the master's degree, so that if you don't go to medical school, at least you have the master's degree. But because there's more grade inflation, I guess, in master's programs, that it doesn't have quite the same credibility. So it's just a trade-off, really. If you're really, really committed to going to medical school and you know that's really what you're going to do, then you might be better off with a post-bac program. If you are not so sure and you kind of want to hedge your bets, then it's possible that the specialized masters could be a smarter choice for you. So it depends a little bit on your reasons for going. If the reason you're going for the post-bac or special masters is more or less about enhancing your GPA, then I'd go the post-bac route. If it's more about, well, I guess in both cases it would be the same whether you're going to because you didn't take your career changer or your academic enhancer. I think the calculation would still be the same. Let's see. I know anecdotes are important and incorporated several into my previous personal statement, but got feedback that it wasn't personal enough. Find it difficult to write about myself in a way that shows who I am as a person. What approaches do you recommend to ensure that the stories reflect more about the narrator, me, than the subject? Well, if the anecdotes are about other people, then it's not going to reflect more about you. So my first, obviously without knowing this, reading your essay, I really can't get too specific myself. But if your stories were about others and didn't reflect at least your reaction to what was going on or your interactions with those others, then the feedback might be valid. So make sure that you're the primary actor in the stories that you tell. I hope that helps. Again, it's pretty hard for me to comment without having seen the essay. Okay. Kathy asks, how do you know if applying late affected your rejection? You can't be sure, but medical school admissions is like musical chairs. Okay, it's rolling admissions, and that means that they start, as they start giving out interview spots, there are fewer and fewer seats available later on. And as they give out acceptances, there are fewer and fewer seats available in the class. So if you applied in June, even in July, I don't think you're late. When you start getting into August, you're really asking, I think you're tempting the fates. Now, schools don't have the deadlines in September and October because they reject everybody who applies the week before, but they just have fewer spots. And that's the reality. So I don't know when exactly you applied, but when you get much, into August, certainly into September, it could easily have played a role if that's when you submitted your primary. Okay, let's see. We have anything else here? Is being a reapplicant considered beneficial or detrimental? If you're a reapplicant, you applied once, you got rejected, and now you're applying a second time. I think it's neutral. It's maybe a little bit beneficial because obviously you're showing commitment, and presumably you've also improved your credentials in the meantime. If you've applied 3 or more times, it starts to be like, what's going on here? I think even the third time, I don't think it's a big deal. I think when you get to fourth or more, then it starts to look like something's off. Okay, and I think it's detrimental. Any more questions? Oh, no, a couple more that came up. Oh, this is an interesting question. Claire, thank you. I'm not sure if this has been answered already, but how would you write essays differently as a reapplicant? Well, you presumably have at least one more year of life experience behind you. And I think that as a reapplicant, while you don't have to not write at all about prior experiences, you are going to focus a little bit more on the growth and maturation that has taken place in the past year. It's a really good question, by the way. So don't just write about what you wrote about when you applied the first time. If that was I don't know if that was a year ago or 2 years ago. Focus more on the more recent experiences. Okay. Now, Janice asked, can you explain the differences with the prices you showed initially offer? Which service were you talking about? The rejection review service between the rush and the regular? Is that what you meant, Janice? Rush and regular. Okay. So our regular service is 2 business day turnaround. Our rush service is 1 business day turnaround. For most of you, especially if you purchase today or tomorrow when we have the special, regular is going to be just fine. You don't, unless there's something going on that I don't know about, you don't need the rush. Thanks for the feedback. This is from Sarah. Can you provide some examples of ways in which an applicant might show maturation since a previous application, particularly if stats experience were not major weaknesses? Well, I believe you were the questioner who said that your stories weren't personal enough. So obviously you're going to want to make them more personal, assuming that you feel the feedback was credible. But another way, as I mentioned to the other poster, is just by focusing on more recent experiences. Presumably, more recently, you've had more responsibility. Almost all of you will have matured in the following year. I like to think that I'm still maturing. And your perspective and the depth of thought that you're going to bring to bear on any experience is going to be different. So you should I don't think you have to worry so much about sounding more mature, but you should be more thoughtful today than you were a year ago or 2 years ago, and that should come through. In terms of the examples, again, I think I would assume that you've been doing something the last year, whether you've been doing teaching or clinical research or worked as a scribe or EMT or whatever. Those experiences are the ones that you should be bringing to bear on your, in your application, and that would be one way to show a new and improved you, and then your thought process automatically should be showing maturation. Good question, though. Let's see what else we have here. Julia asks, are there studies regarding a correlation between specific MCAT scores and academic success that med schools rely on as a screening tool? I don't know of those kinds of correlation. I do know and have read about a correlation between, well, I guess this is what you're asking about, on the USMLE, step 1 and maybe step 2. Okay, so. Let's see. Okay, Claire asked as a follow-up to the previous question, should my personal statement be more focused on what I've been doing in the past year than on my general road to becoming a physician? Again, I'm a little bit at a disadvantage without reading your actual essays, both last year's one and this year's one, but yes, that would be my advice. I don't think you have to throw out every thought that was in your previous personal statement, but I would focus more on this year. I would highlight it, that's for sure. Is it necessary to rewrite every secondary and change it from the previous year? Well, they didn't work last year. I don't think you want to have the same outcome. So unless you felt like every single one of them was perfect in Shakespeare, etc., then I would strongly recommend that you change them. Again, you want to reflect the experiences you've had this year, the growth you've had this year, and they probably weren't Shakespeare. So they didn't work. I would definitely change them. And yeah, you could say, look, you haven't seen them. And you're right, I haven't seen them. But without having seen them, understanding that I haven't seen them, I would say, yes, you need to change them. Okay. I want to thank you very much for your time, your answers, your questions, your participation, and I want to wish you good luck with your next application. Rachel, can you send Janice a link to the exhibit.com/medical? Final thought and a story. When our eldest son was a baby, my husband and I went to an event where we met a mentor of ours. He took one look at the chubby, sleeping baby in the stroller and said, "This is an experiment that must be repeated." Applying to medical school and getting rejected is the opposite. It is an experiment that you don't want to repeat. You need to evaluate what went wrong and change your application strategy and execution in order to have different results. That kind of relates directly to Nicholas's question about rewriting secondaries. And now the story about a client who had very different results. Let's call her Terry, that's not her real name. She accepted to work with her. She had previously applied to medical school and received one interview invitation, no acceptances. She had a below average MCAT and GPA for most allopathic medical schools. The second time around, she worked with accepted consultant Dr. Barry Rothman, who evaluated her application and helped her improve it. Result, she was invited to 5 interviews and accepted to 2 MD programs. Terry did as so many others have done over the last 20 plus years. She accessed the objectivity, expertise, and experience that an accepted consultant provides. She started medical school last summer and donned her white coat shortly thereafter. She's going to be an MD. Imagine yourself just a couple of years behind her, starting medical school in summer 2020 and attending your own white coat ceremony shortly thereafter. She followed the steps on the screen. She got accepted to medical school, and so can you. Get accepted.